The morning sun cast long shadows across Samuel Matthews' drought-stricken ranch in Arizona Territory, 1887. The land that once supported hundreds of cattle now barely sustained a dozen scrawny animals. Samuel wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as he surveyed his dying property. At 42, he had invested everything into this ranch, but 3 consecutive years of drought had pushed him to the edge of bankruptcy. Samuel's water wells had run dry months ago, forcing him to trek 5 miles daily to a distant creek for precious water. His wife had left him the previous winter, taking their 2 children back east to her family, unable to bear the hardship any longer. The bank had already sent 2 notices threatening foreclosure, and Samuel knew he had perhaps 2 weeks before losing everything. On this particular morning, Samuel decided to venture further than usual in search of water. He had heard rumors of a hidden spring deep in Apache territory, though most settlers avoided the area due to ongoing tensions with the local tribes. Desperation, however, drove him forward where caution might have held him back. As Samuel rode his tired horse through the rocky terrain, the sun climbed higher, and the heat became almost unbearable. His water supply had run dangerously low, and both he and his horse were showing signs of severe dehydration. The landscape seemed endless, with nothing but red rocks and sparse vegetation stretching in every direction. It was near midday when Samuel heard something that made him stop abruptly. Voices carried on the wind, speaking in a language he didn't understand but recognized as Apache. His first instinct was to turn back, but as he strained to listen, he realized the voices sounded distressed, almost panicked. Following the sound, Samuel dismounted and carefully climbed a rocky outcrop to get a better view. What he saw below shocked him completely. 2 young Apache women, both unusually tall and striking, were trapped in a deep ravine. A recent rockslide had apparently blocked their path out, and they appeared to have been there for some time. The women looked exhausted and dehydrated. One appeared to be injured, favoring her left leg, while the other was frantically trying to find a way out of their rocky prison. Samuel could see their horses had wandered off, leaving them stranded without supplies or water. Samuel's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Helping Apache women could be seen as treason by many settlers, and it might put him in danger with both communities. However, his conscience wouldn't allow him to leave anyone to die in the desert, regardless of their heritage. Making his decision, Samuel called out to them in the few Apache words he had learned from friendly traders over the years. The women looked up in alarm, clearly suspicious of this stranger. Samuel slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm and pointed to his water canteen, then to them. The taller of the 2 women, who appeared to be the elder sister, spoke sharply in Apache, clearly warning him to stay away. But Samuel could see the desperation in their eyes. He slowly descended into the ravine, moving carefully to avoid startling them further. Once closer, Samuel could see that both women were indeed in dire condition. The injured sister had a badly swollen ankle, likely sprained or broken from the rockslide. Both showed signs of severe dehydration, with cracked lips and sunken eyes. They had probably been trapped for at least 2 days. Samuel offered his water canteen to the women, but they initially refused, suspicious of his motives. Through gestures and the few Apache phrases he knew, Samuel tried to communicate that he only wanted to help. Eventually, thirst overcame their caution, and they accepted the water gratefully. The injured sister introduced herself as Ayana, which Samuel learned meant eternal blossom in their language. The elder sister was called Etzel, meaning Rainbow Lady. Both were daughters of a respected Apache chief, though Samuel didn't understand this at the time. Samuel assessed their situation carefully. The rockslide had created a barrier about 12 feet high, too steep and unstable to climb safely. The women had tried repeatedly to escape, but had only managed to injure Ayana further in their attempts. Samuel realized he would need rope and possibly help to get them out safely. He explained through gestures that he needed to go back for supplies. The sisters were clearly reluctant to let him leave, fearing he might not return or might bring others with hostile intentions. Samuel left his water with them as a gesture of good faith and promised to return before sunset. Racing back to his ranch, Samuel gathered every piece of rope he owned, along with his remaining food supplies and all his water containers filled from his emergency reserve. He also brought basic medical supplies and blankets, knowing the desert nights were brutally cold. The journey back to the ravine took longer than expected, as Samuel's horse was struggling with the extra weight and the punishing heat. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, Samuel worried he might not make it back in time to help the women before darkness fell. When Samuel finally returned to the ravine, he found both sisters huddled together, having conserved the water he had left them. Relief flooded their faces when they saw him approach with supplies. They had clearly been uncertain whether this strange white rancher would actually return to help them. Working quickly before darkness fell, Samuel rigged a pulley system using his ropes and the sturdy branches of a dead tree. The rescue proved more challenging than anticipated, as Ayanna's injury made it difficult for her to help with her own extraction. Samuel had to carefully lower himself into the ravine to assist her. The process took several hours, with Samuel making multiple trips up and down the ravine walls. By the time both sisters were safely on level ground, the desert stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. All three were exhausted, but Samuel knew they couldn't attempt the journey back to safety in the dark. Samuel made camp for the night, sharing his limited food with the sisters and building a small fire for warmth. Despite the language barrier, the three began to communicate through gestures, broken English that Itzel had learned from traders, and Samuel's limited Apache vocabulary. As they sat around the fire, Samuel learned more about the sisters' situation. They had been traveling to visit relatives in a distant village when the rock slide trapped them. Their father, whom they referred to with great respect, was apparently searching for them, though they had been traveling on a route known only to family members. The sisters, in turn, learned about Samuel's dire circumstances. They seemed genuinely sympathetic to his plight, understanding the connection between land and survival. Itzel mentioned something about debts and honor that Samuel didn't fully grasp at the time. As the night progressed, Samuel found himself impressed by the sisters' courage and dignity despite their ordeal. They had faced their situation with remarkable composure and had shown no signs of panic even in the most desperate moments. Their strength reminded him of the best qualities he had seen in frontier survivors. Around midnight, Samuel was awakened by the sound of approaching horses. His blood ran cold as he realized that Apache warriors were approaching their small camp. The sisters had heard them too, and were speaking rapidly in their native language. Samuel's first thought was that he might have made a terrible mistake in helping them. However, instead of alarm, he saw relief and joy on the sisters' faces. Itzel called out into the darkness, and voices responded from the approaching riders. Samuel realized this must be the rescue party that had been searching for the missing women. As dawn approached, Samuel found himself surrounded by Apache warriors, their faces painted for war and their weapons ready. The sisters were speaking rapidly to what appeared to be their leader, gesturing towards Samuel and explaining the events of the past day. Samuel couldn't understand the words, but the tone suggested they were defending his actions. The warrior leader, an imposing man with eagle feathers in his hair and scars marking his arms, studied Samuel intently. Samuel met his gaze steadily, knowing that showing fear now could be interpreted as weakness or guilt. The tension in the camp was palpable as the other warriors awaited their leader's decision about this unexpected white man who had aided their people. Samuel knew that his fate, and possibly the fate of his ranch, now hung in the balance. He had acted from compassion and basic human decency, but he was well aware that good intentions didn't always guarantee survival on the frontier. As the Apache leader continued his silent assessment, Samuel could only wait and hope that his actions would speak louder than the prejudices and conflicts that divided their two peoples. The Apache war leader dismounted his painted horse with fluid grace, his keen eyes never leaving Samuel's face. The man stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms marked with both battle scars and intricate tribal tattoos. His presence commanded immediate respect from every warrior in the group, and Samuel realized he was likely facing someone of considerable importance within the tribe. Itzel stepped forward, still limping slightly from her ordeal, and spoke earnestly to the leader in rapid Apache. She gestured repeatedly toward Samuel, her voice carrying tones of gratitude and respect. Ayanna, despite her injured ankle, also joined the conversation, adding her own account of Samuel's rescue efforts and his treatment of them during their time of need. Samuel stood quietly, understanding that his fate was being decided in a language he couldn't comprehend. He noticed how the warriors' expressions shifted as the sisters continued their explanation. Some of the initial hostility seemed to fade from their faces, replaced by curiosity and what might have been grudging respect. The leader raised his hand, and immediate silence fell over the group. He approached Samuel slowly, studying him with dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. When he was close enough to touch, the leader spoke in heavily accented but clear English, surprising Samuel completely. "I am Chief Nalnish of the Chiricahua Apache. These are my daughters, whom you have saved from certain death in the desert." His voice was deep and measured, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "They tell me you risked your life to help them, expecting nothing in return. They say you shared your water, your food, and your protection with enemies of your people." Samuel found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Sir, I saw two human beings in trouble. Their heritage didn't matter to me. Anyone deserves help when they're dying of thirst in the desert." He paused, then added, "Your daughters showed great courage during their ordeal. They are a credit to your family." Chief Nalnish nodded slowly, apparently pleased by Samuel's respectful tone. "My daughters also tell me you are facing troubles of your own. They say your land is dying, your family has left you, and you face the loss of everything you have worked to build." Samuel was surprised by how much the sisters had understood about his situation, despite the language barriers and limited communication time. "Yes, sir. The drought has been hard on all of us, but my problems didn't seem important when I found your daughters trapped in that ravine." The chief walked a slow circle around Samuel, clearly assessing everything about him from his worn boots to his sun-weathered hands. The other warriors remained motionless, awaiting their leader's judgment. Samuel could feel sweat beading on his forehead, but he forced himself to remain still and calm under the intense scrutiny. "You could have ridden away," Chief Nalnish said finally. "You could have pretended you never saw them. Many of your people would have done exactly that. Some might have even taken advantage of their helpless condition for their own purposes." His voice carried a hint of steel as he spoke of such possibilities. "The thought never crossed my mind," Samuel replied honestly. "I was raised to believe that helping others in need is simply the right thing to do, regardless of who they are or where they come from." Chief Nalnish stopped in front of Samuel again, his penetrating gaze seeming to weigh Samuel's very soul. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Finally, the chief spoke again, his tone carrying a note of decision. "My daughters owe you their lives. According to our customs, this creates a debt of honor that must be repaid. However, they tell me you are a man without means to provide proper compensation for such a service." The chief's expression remained neutral, giving Samuel no hint of what judgment was coming. Samuel felt compelled to respond. "Chief Nalnish, I don't want any compensation. I helped your daughters because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected payment. Their safety is reward enough for me." A slight smile seemed to flicker across the chief's face at these words, but it vanished so quickly Samuel might have imagined it. "Honor demands payment, whether you seek it or not. The question is what form that payment should take." Chief Nalnish turned away from Samuel and spoke in Apache to his warriors. Samuel caught a few familiar words but couldn't follow the conversation. The discussion seemed to go on for quite some time, with various warriors offering their opinions and the chief listening carefully to each perspective. During this discussion, Itzel approached Samuel quietly. Her English, though limited, was better than he had initially realized. "My father is good man," she said softly. "He always does what is right, even when it is difficult. You saved our lives, and now he must decide how our people can repay this debt properly." Samuel nodded, unsure what to say. He was beginning to understand that he had inadvertently become involved in something much more complex than a simple rescue. The concept of honor debt clearly carried serious weight in Apache culture, and Chief Nalnish was struggling with how to handle the situation appropriately. Ayana, who had been tending to her injured ankle, also made her way over to Samuel. Despite her pain, she managed a grateful smile. "You are good man," she said in halting English. "Apache people remember good men. My father will find way to honor your kindness." The discussion among the warriors continued for nearly an hour, with voices occasionally rising as different viewpoints were debated. Samuel noticed that some of the younger warriors seemed more skeptical of him, while the older, more experienced men appeared to support whatever decision the chief was leaning toward. Finally, Chief Nalnish called for silence and returned to where Samuel waited. The chief's expression had become thoughtful, as if he had reached a decision that required careful explanation. "Samuel Matthews," the chief began, using Samuel's name for the first time, which startled him since he didn't remember giving it to the sisters. "You have shown our people a kindness that few white men would show. You risked your safety to save my daughters, and you treated them with respect and dignity throughout their ordeal." Samuel waited, sensing that more was coming. The chief's formal tone suggested that something significant was about to be decided. "However," Chief Nalnish continued, "the debt of honor created by your actions cannot be simply dismissed or ignored. Our customs demand that such a debt be repaid in a manner that truly reflects the value of what was given. 2 lives saved requires a substantial response." The chief paused, looking toward his daughters, who nodded encouragingly. "My daughters have told me about your troubles with your ranch and your need for water. They have also observed your character during the time you spent together. Based on their testimony and my own assessment of you, I have reached a decision." Samuel's heart was pounding as he waited for the chief's verdict. He had no idea what form Apache justice might take, or whether his good intentions would be enough to protect him from any negative consequences of his involvement with the chief's daughters. "You will return with us to our village," Chief Nalnish declared. "There, the full council will hear the testimony of my daughters and will make a final determination about how this debt of honor should be repaid. This is not a punishment, but rather a necessity of our customs." Samuel felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. On one hand, he wasn't being treated as an enemy or threat. On the other hand, he was being taken to an Apache village, something that few white men had ever experienced and returned to tell about. "I understand, Chief Nalnish," Samuel replied. "I'll go with you willingly. I hope your council will find my actions worthy of whatever consideration you deem appropriate." The chief nodded approvingly at Samuel's respectful acceptance of the situation. "You will be treated as an honored guest while the council deliberates. Your safety will be guaranteed by my personal word, regardless of the council's final decision." As the Apache warriors began preparing for the journey back to their village, Samuel gathered his few belongings and prepared his horse for what would certainly be the most unusual trip of his life. He had awakened that morning as a failing rancher facing bankruptcy, and now he was about to enter the heart of Apache territory as the guest of one of their most powerful chiefs. Itzel approached him one final time before they departed. "My father is fair man," she assured him. "The council will see what we saw in you. Your kindness will not be forgotten or unrewarded." Her words provided some comfort, but Samuel knew he was venturing into completely unknown territory, both literally and figuratively. As the group mounted their horses and began the journey toward the Apache stronghold, Samuel couldn't help but wonder what verdict the council would reach and how it might change his life forever. The Apache village appeared before Samuel like something from another world. Hidden in a natural basin surrounded by towering red cliffs, the settlement was far larger and more organized than he had imagined. Dozens of traditional dwellings dotted the landscape, with cooking fires sending thin columns of smoke into the morning air. Children played between the structures while women worked on various crafts, and men tended to horses in carefully organized corrals. As their group entered the village, Samuel noticed how every activity stopped. Eyes followed their progress through the settlement, and he could hear whispered conversations in Apache, spreading the news of their arrival. The presence of a white man among Chief Nalnish's warriors was clearly unexpected and significant to the community. Chief Nalnish led Samuel to a substantial dwelling near the center of the village, its entrance decorated with elaborate patterns and symbols that spoke of high status within the tribe. "You will stay here as my guest," the chief explained. "The council will convene at sunset to hear the full account of recent events and to determine the appropriate response to your actions." Samuel was provided with food, fresh water, and clean clothes more elaborate than anything he had worn in years. The hospitality was generous and dignified, though he remained acutely aware that he was completely dependent on Apache goodwill for his safety. Throughout the day, various tribal members came to observe him, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed suspicion. Itzel and Ayana spent time with Samuel during the afternoon, helping him understand what to expect from the council proceedings. They explained that the tribal council consisted of the most respected elders and warriors, individuals whose wisdom and judgment were considered beyond question by the community. "The council will ask you to tell your story yourself," Itzel explained. "They will want to hear your words, see your face, and judge your character directly. Speak truthfully and simply. Apache people value honesty above all other virtues." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, drums started beating throughout the village, summoning the community to witness the council proceedings. Samuel was escorted to a large, circular area where tribal members had gathered in carefully organized groups. The council members sat in a semicircle, their faces grave and attentive. Chief Nalnish stood and addressed the assembly in Apache, his voice carrying clearly across the gathering. Samuel couldn't understand the words, but the chief's tone was formal and respectful as he explained the situation to his people. When he finished, he gestured for Samuel to step forward into the center of the circle. An elderly woman, her hair white as snow and her face marked with intricate tattoos, rose from among the council members. Itzel whispered that she was the eldest council member and a revered medicine woman whose words carried enormous weight in all tribal decisions. "White man," the medicine woman said in accented but clear English, "tell us why you helped daughters of our chief when you could have gained nothing from such actions. Speak truth, for we will know if you lie to us." Samuel took a deep breath, understanding that this moment would determine his fate. "Honored elders," he began, "I helped Chief Nalnish's daughters because they were human beings in desperate need of assistance. I was raised to believe that when someone is dying, you help them regardless of who they are or where they come from. I would hope that someone would do the same for my family if they were in similar trouble." The medicine woman nodded slowly. "And what did you expect to gain from helping them?" "Nothing," Samuel answered immediately. I expected nothing except the satisfaction of knowing I had done the right thing. When I found them trapped in that ravine, my only thought was getting them to safety before they died of thirst or exposure. Another council member, a scarred warrior with graying hair, stood up. You risked entering Apache territory, where many of your people have been killed for trespassing. You shared your water and food with enemies of your race. Why should we believe you acted from good intentions rather than hoping to gain information about our people or our lands? Samuel met the warrior's challenging gaze directly. Because if I had wanted to spy on your people, I would have left your chief's daughters to die and followed their trail back to this village in secret. Instead, I openly helped them and accepted the consequences of that choice, whatever they might be. The questions continued for over an hour, with various council members probing different aspects of Samuel's story and motivations. They asked about his background, his family, his financial troubles, and his attitudes toward Apache people. Samuel answered each question as honestly as possible, knowing that any deception would likely be detected by these experienced judges of human character. Finally, Chief Nalnish stood to address the council. My daughters have testified that this man risked his life to save theirs. He shared his last water and food with them. He spent his own money and resources to rescue them from certain death. He asked for nothing in return and expected nothing. According to our customs, such actions create a debt of honor that must be repaid. The chief paused, looking around the circle of council members. However, this debt cannot be repaid with simple gifts or token gestures. 2 lives saved requires a response that truly reflects the value of what was given. I propose that we honor Samuel Matthews not just with gifts, but with an alliance that will benefit both our peoples. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd at these unexpected words. Samuel felt his heart racing as he tried to understand what the chief was suggesting. The medicine woman rose again, her ancient eyes studying Samuel intently. Chief Nalnish, explain to the council what form this alliance should take. Samuel Matthews needs water to save his ranch and his livelihood, the chief replied. We know of a substantial underground spring on the border between his land and our traditional territory. This spring could provide enough water for his cattle and crops, but accessing it would require cooperation between our peoples. The chief gestured toward Samuel. I propose that we grant Samuel Matthews the right to use this water source in exchange for his pledge to serve as a bridge of understanding between our communities. He has already proven his good character by risking his life for Apache people. He could help prevent the misunderstandings and conflicts that have caused so much bloodshed between our peoples. Samuel was stunned by this proposal. Access to a reliable water source would not only save his ranch, but could make it prosperous beyond his wildest dreams. However, he also understood that accepting such an arrangement would place him in a unique and potentially dangerous position between 2 communities that had been at war for generations. Another council member, a woman with elaborate silver jewelry and an air of great authority, spoke up. Such an alliance would be unprecedented. How can we trust that this white man will honor his obligations to our people once his immediate problems are solved? Chief Nalnish smiled at this question. Because he will be bound by Apache law as well as white man's law. If he breaks his word to us, he will lose access to the water and face the consequences of betraying our trust. If he keeps his word, both our peoples will benefit from improved relations and mutual understanding. The council members began discussing the proposal among themselves in Apache, their voices rising and falling as different viewpoints were debated. Samuel waited in the center of the circle, aware that his entire future was being decided by people whose language he barely understood. After what seemed like hours, the medicine woman called for silence. Samuel Matthews, she said formally, the council has reached a decision regarding the debt of honor created by your rescue of Chief Nalnish's daughters. Samuel straightened, prepared to accept whatever verdict was announced. We find that your actions were motivated by genuine compassion and courage, the medicine woman continued. You risked your safety to save 2 Apache women, and you treated them with respect and dignity throughout their ordeal. Such behavior deserves recognition and reward. She paused, building suspense among the gathered crowd. Therefore, the council grants you perpetual access to the sacred spring known as Flowing Eagle, located on the boundary between your land and our territory. In exchange, you will serve as an ambassador of peace between our peoples, helping to prevent conflicts and misunderstandings through honest communication and mutual respect. The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs at this announcement. Samuel felt his knees go weak with relief and amazement. Access to a reliable water source would transform his failing ranch into a thriving operation, while the role of peace ambassador, though challenging, was an honor he could never have imagined. Chief Nalnish stepped forward with a satisfied expression. Samuel Matthews, you entered our territory as a stranger facing ruin. You leave as a friend of our people with the means to rebuild your life. Use this gift wisely, and remember always that your good fortune comes from choosing compassion over convenience. As the council session ended and the crowd began to disperse, Samuel felt overwhelmed by the dramatic turn his life had taken. In less than 3 days, he had gone from facing bankruptcy to receiving an opportunity that would secure his future for generations to come. Itzel and Ayanna approached him as the formal proceedings concluded. Both sisters were smiling broadly, clearly pleased with the council's decision. Now you see why Apache people value honor so highly, Itzel said. Good actions always return good results, though sometimes in ways we never expect. Samuel spent 2 more days in the Apache village, learning about the water rights he had been granted and beginning to understand his new responsibilities as a peace ambassador. Chief Nalnish personally showed him the location of the spring, which was indeed substantial enough to support a large ranching operation. When Samuel finally returned to his own land, he found that news of his strange adventure had already spread throughout the territory. Some settlers were suspicious of his new relationship with the Apache, while others were curious about the possibilities for improved relations between the communities. Samuel immediately began developing the water source, and within months his ranch was thriving as it never had before. True to his word, he also served as a mediator in several disputes between settlers and Apache, helping to prevent conflicts that might have escalated into violence. Years later, Samuel would often reflect on how a simple act of human kindness had transformed not only his own life, but had created a lasting bridge between 2 previously hostile communities. The rescue of 2 Apache sisters in a desert ravine had led to prosperity, purpose, and a legacy of peace that would benefit both peoples for generations to come. His ranch became a symbol of successful cooperation between different cultures, while his role as peace ambassador helped establish a new model for frontier relations based on mutual respect rather than mutual suspicion. Samuel Matthews had entered Apache territory as a penniless rancher facing ruin, but he had emerged as a prosperous landowner and respected peacemaker, all because he had chosen to help 2 strangers in their moment of greatest need.